Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 265 of the podcast for October 12th, 2016. Joining me today is Bernita Beikmann. She is a principal and director of lean strategy at HKS, an international architecture firm. Bernita is originally from Kansas and has a Bachelor of Architecture degree from Kansas State University and a certificate in regional and community planning. She moved to Dallas in 1996, has been employed by HKS since that time. Now, Bernita and I first crossed paths a few years ago. We had the opportunity to work together on a project for Riley Hospital for Children in Indianapolis to work with staff and leaders on designing parts of a new hospital tower using lean principles, incorporating workflows and lean design. You can read a bit about that in a link that is on the page for this episode at leanblog.org/265. There are links to the Lean Construction Institute, the book The Toyota Way that Bernita used originally to learn about lean, and a more recent book about the work at Akron Children's Hospital, a book called Lean Operations, Lean Design, Lean Construction, Building a Lean Hospital Facility. And if you go to that page, again at leanblog.org/265, there's a link to download a PDF of the new chapter in the third edition of my book, Lean Hospitals, on these principles of lean design. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and as always, thanks for listening. Bernita, hi. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thanks, Mark. It's good to be here.
So if you can start off, it'd be interesting to hear about some of your professional background and what you do, and maybe also kind of then segue into how, as an architect, you first got exposed to lean.
So I will give you my lean life story. Probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I remember I had a child right before it, so that helps to remember the timeline. I had a client who requested that we transition a project from a traditional project structure to a lean project delivery method. And because of that, the client educated the entire team. We, read the Toyota Way together. We did some other studies together. We ended up completing that project using lean project delivery, tried to improve the way we do work. And I think it opened the eyes of everyone on the team that even though we thought we were doing a great job, everyone was a professional in their field, mm-hmm. and had good reputation as doing a great job, that we could actually do better, and not only by ourselves, but by our clients as well. So I did a little bit more education on my own, and was fortunate enough to work on several other projects that were not only doing it for the design and construction delivery of the project, but also in their internal operations as well. So many healthcare systems who were looking at how they could actually deliver care differently, how they could improve both the patient experience and the staff experience within hospital facilities. So I started jumping in to get a little bit deeper education myself, reading as much as I could, both offered by Lean Enterprise Institute, classes I could take. And then I think the last big education effort was about years ago. I completed my Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, just so that I not only could continue the work on projects, but also be a leader in my organization to actually do improvements within how we deliver projects, regardless of delivery type, and how we even treat our staff. So it's been a great experience for me to just improve myself and get the opportunity to improve my industry and my organization.
Yeah. And maybe if you can give a little bit of background, to the type of work you do as an architect. How would you describe or compare and contrast, what you called that traditional model for working with a client to a lean project delivery model? There might be listeners who don't know that term even. But I mean, how people who've never worked with architects and that redesign or construction process, how would you compare and contrast the old way and the lean way?
So I probably didn't mention this, but I am an architect in the state of Texas. I've been a architect with HKS 20 years. I had my 20-year anniversary in June. So most people, I think, have some kind of familiarity with a traditional construction process, whether they've had a sidewalk poured in the yard or an improvement done on their house. And usually the process is you either have an idea of what you want or you hire a design professional to help you with that idea of what you want, and you might have an agreement with that design professional, and then you independently hire construction professionals to build it. So right away you have two big giant silos. You have the people that designed the project for you, and you have the people that are going to build the project for you. And sometimes even people that are building the project, or most of the time the people that are building the project, actually have multiple other contracts with other organizations that are doing, especially when you have a big project, doing other pieces of the work. So if it's on your house, you might hire a general contractor to actually build your house or renovate your house, but they will still hire someone to do the floor, they'll hire someone to do the plumbing, they'll hire someone independently. So now we have even more silos of people who are doing work, not necessarily knowing what your vision is as a homeowner or a business owner, not understanding all of that, but they're all trying to perform the work based on what they feel. So using lean actually aligns all those different groups to work together, and it allows people to have a shared idea of what the client and the end customer actually wants. It allows them to look at it from a different perspective and work together differently. So oftentimes projects that are delivered in a lean way, it's a team approach to delivering a project. You often get a better aligned vision to what you really want, and you get that better aligned vision for a much better price, and often with better quality, just because you removed all those separate silos and you allow people to work together in the best way possible.
So in the traditional model, I guess some of the pain points for the client more specifically, it's not just the process pain point of they don't understand our vision or people are working in silos. Does that lead to, I guess, the slow delivery, missing deadlines, going over cost, not quite translating the needs into what's actually built, problems like that?
Well, if you think about just the simple contrast between something like single piece flow and batch flow. So single piece, the lean mindset actually creates the better opportunity for single piece flow, because all those different companies are brought together to create the best process initially to deliver the project in a way that's most cost effective and gets the best value. Whereas a traditional model, all I care about is my contract, what I produce, and I'm going to produce everything that I need to produce at the time that's convenient for me. So it's more of a batch thrown into the system, and it lands where it needs to land. And yes, there's coordination involved at some level, but the introduction of lean into that overall process helps create a better mindset to deliver that project more effectively.
I mean, part of what you're describing, it sounds like there's almost some good parallels to somebody trying to navigate the healthcare system as a patient. They may be dealing with a lot of individual silos, and like you said, everyone's individually doing their best, or trying to meet their own goals, but they're having to coordinate their own care. And is that addressed, jumping back to architecture, through this lean project delivery model of the client not being the only one who's trying to manage all the silos?
Yeah, and I think really there's a lot of really good parallels between the health industry in design and construction. Mostly, if you think about in terms of, there's people that supply a product to a hospital, and there's people just that distribute the product within the hospital. But really what the patient cares about is, getting the equipment and the medicine to make them feel better so that they can go home. So that's the most important part of that. But you have all these outside factors that are supplying these equipment and materials in different ways, and a lot of times those different systems don't even talk to each other, or they've never even had a conversation about how they're going to work together.
Right.
And that's really what we're doing by combining lean operations and lean design and construction, is actually facilitating sessions where suppliers and equipment providers and staff and in a lot of cases representation from patients and families have conversations about what is the best methods for a patient to receive care, and of course with staff input as well, as what is the safest way for them to deliver that care as well, and then facilitating an environment that supports that. So if I've decided, for instance, that the best way to reduce errors and the best way to deliver patient care is by having medicine at the bedside, that means I'm going to design a patient room in a different way, and I will design medication rooms in a different way. And I may design storage rooms in a different way to actually gather the materials as they come into the building. So there's a direct correlation to the work that the operational improvement work that our clients do and the built environment. And the built environment can support it in a way that allows for flexibility and can actually make it perform better operationally.
So, you've touched on a little bit about how this process works of getting staff involved, understanding staff needs and what they need to do with the patient. Can you maybe kind of step back and kind of walk through the lean project delivery model? If an organization is getting started in, let's say, a major redesign of a space or building a new tower or building a new site, can you kind of walk through how that process works at a high level? How do you help coordinate that as the architect?
So usually the first question that we ask, and sometimes the organizations, if they do have a lean operational improvement program in place, already have a first step of this, is we want them to understand how they're operating now and why they're operating that way. Because a lot of times, if we walk like in a non-lean design way, we'll walk in and offer solutions to problems they have without understanding what the problem is in the first place. So I might walk in, and the easiest thing for me to pick on is, workstations on wheels. The facility could tell me, I hate workstations on wheels, and we could say, okay, well, we just won't put them in the new facility, and I'm going to walk in day one and have designed a patient floor that doesn't contain them. What we really want them to understand is how they're doing things now and why they're doing them that way. And then we want to think about what their future state is going to be, understanding the cultural norms that they have in place in their community, understanding things that are out there as far as new trends or new technology, and start to think about what could be their ideal and what could be their future state. And then we'll often come and do presentations on trends that we're seeing in the industry, or we may take them on site tours of other facilities that are newer or that have a model, just to give them different ways to think about how facilities are working. Because sometimes, if I've worked my entire career in a certain facility, I might not understand the possibilities that exist if the equipment was different or the technology was different, or any number of factors. So we have those initial discussions. We might do visioning sessions to understand what their vision and goals are for the new facility, and then we'll usually take them on either a small or a large version of a 3P process, which a production preparation process or people preparation process, where we do rapid prototyping of different options for the design of a space. And it's very interactive. It could be, we use the staff as part of that, but it's kind of rapid fire, looking at different options and asking a lot of questions on adjacencies and overall space allocation for different possibilities. And a lot of times we'll create either small versions of, for instance, if we were doing a patient floor, we might immediately start creating different mock-ups of that patient, but some facilities we've mocked up entire departments, and we'll do that rapidly. We might look at 3 to 4 different mock-ups of their department in a week-long period. And the way we can do that is because we make it out of things like cardboard. 4x8 sheets of cardboard can be configured easily. People can walk through it much like they would walk through something, a month before they open and do day in the life training, or they're doing initial training for. They do things like, okay, what happens in this room if there's a code? And they run through that scenario, and what happens in this room if you need to do actually a OR procedure with an emergency procedure in this room. Do you have enough space? Do you have the right equipment? Do you have the right adjacencies to elevators or medicine or supplies? And that allows us to observe and make adjustments to the plans before they actually even exist. So if you can think about that from a construction perspective, a lot of traditional projects will do that kind of training and do those kind of observations after the keys are turned over or when construction's about finished. We had one client who did that kind of training and ended up moving some rooms multiple times. They specifically moved their meds room 3 times before they opened, which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to do that because they were about to open. Whereas we're doing this with cardboard, we can rip it down and physically just move it over in the matter of an hour, and then they can run that test again and see if they've actually improved their output. And it's very effective in terms of staff understanding the space as well, because a lot of times, actually most times, staff are not familiar with looking at drawings. So expecting them to understand, much less comment on a 2-dimensional line drawing of a space, is not nearly as effective as saying, you understand your job, here it is in 3 dimensions, to scale, go take care of a patient and see if it works. And we're able to add details, make adjustments on the fly quite easily before we even draw anything. So beyond that, then you can go into other layers of how we work with the design, the rest of the construction team, where we might pull in the people that are actually building the drywall trades or the window trades that are actually building some of these things, and have them come up with different ways for us to make adjustments to save cost on the project. And sometimes that saving cost on the project actually lets our clients maybe buy better equipment than they could before, or maybe that we're just making improvements to the physical environment. So something like changing, vinyl tile to rubber flooring, which is actually better for the staff that's working on it long term, and it's quieter for the patient. So there's a lot of different trade-offs we can do when we start pulling the normally siloed groups in and having honest discussions about how we build things and how much things cost, so that we can improve the value and quality of the overall project. So that was a lot of information.
Yeah, but you've touched on a lot of the highlights. Maybe we can come back and dig into some of those aspects a little bit more. But you highlight the teamwork, the iterative process. Breaking down silos, as you mentioned earlier. How does the role of the construction company change in this LPD process? Is it more collaborative with the construction company as opposed to, I don't know if this was the case in the past, of doing the design and then kind of throwing it over the wall and saying, here, you build it? Can you talk about some of the teamwork and collaboration that you would hope to see? Yeah,
absolutely it is. Traditionally, it's pretty much the design professionals have to get to a certain point where the construction professionals, sometimes they comment on constructability, but most often it's cost, and it's very much throw it over the wall, find out where we are, throw it back over, and us oftentimes having to strip out things to get it into cost. So by inviting them into the process, there may be small changes that we can make that don't affect operations, but that significantly change cost. So everything from, reducing angled walls, reducing constructability, actually even sometimes improving the ability for the actual construction to be safer. There are things that we can do on how we detail different elements in the building to make it safer to construct so that they actually improve labor during construction, which overall can reduce cost. So it's fairly complex, but by working together with them, both from an estimating perspective and from a constructability perspective, there's a lot of improvements we can make as an industry that ultimately lead to our end customers getting more for their money.
Right. Well, and when you talk about getting more for their money, I think you've brought up this idea a couple times already. There's a big difference between, I think as you just put it, stripping out cost and reducing waste and saving money in a way that doesn't leave people feeling like they actually got less value from their building. That seems like a really nice common core lean principle there of reducing waste instead of just cutting costs. Is there anything you could say to elaborate on that idea?
Well, and I think it's also giving the client and end users enough information to make the right decision. Because if I go and ask a nurse that's working in an ED, what kind of door do you want? They might pick the most expensive door that's out there. So they might want an automatic glass slider that allows them to see in the room, that has integral blinds and all this great stuff. If I ask them, compared to the cost of that door and this piece of equipment that allows you to, if we take the $5,000 of the door instead and apply it to a $5,000 piece of equipment that can provide better patient care, there's a greater chance that they would pick the best thing for the patient. Now, in some cases, it might be the door, but other cases, it might be that piece of equipment. But us having those conversations in the room about safety things for patients, better care, safety things for staff, gives them the right information to make the best decision. Whereas sometimes, if we can't include them because it's 6 months after the users are even involved when we find out we have a cost issue, the overall team might have to make hard decisions without that direct input. And I would rather have their input on making those decisions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like, is there a parallel to medicine where, I think there's tension sometimes with the old model is the patient just tells the doctor, well, you tell me what to do. You're the expert, as opposed to a model, a more engaged patient model of, providing information, alternatives to that patient, sometimes taking the financial considerations into account and letting the patient be more of a partner, helping the patient make that decision. That strikes me as similar to what you're describing. Is there sort of an old model where the client would say, for better or for worse, hey, you're the architect, you tell me how to do it, as opposed to collaborating?
Right, and we still see a little of that because there are still clients who are like, well, you're the experts. We want the top of the line thing, but there are so many different facets to it. So much like if I can get staff buy-in to the space that's being designed and they have an understanding of why different decisions were made, there's a greater chance that they're going to be happier in that space, and they know why we made certain decisions. And the same thing with patient care. If I have an understanding of why I'm getting certain medicines, what are they supposed to do for me, why I'm supposed to be, doing the rehab and the benefits to me, there's a greater chance that I'm going to take that medicine, I'm going to do that rehab, and I'm going to actually participate in my own, wellness, as opposed to just saying this stuff better work.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definite parallels between the two.
Yeah. Well, one other thing, kind of go back to some of your earlier points. You talked about healthcare organizations who have some form of a lean program, and realizing that could mean a lot of different things in a spectrum of experience with lean or commitment to lean. Do you see kind of a wide spectrum? Do people tend to have a fairly advanced approach to lean to be at a point where they're reaching out and asking for lean design, or do you have people who are at earlier stages who maybe see this as a way of getting started? And within that spectrum, do you have any reflections on? Maybe this isn't the right way of asking the question of who is more successful with this lean approach to design and construction?
I think ideally they're all like deep into their journey that we can just support it, right? But I will take anything or just the idea that an organization is trying to do their best to be better than they were yesterday is a good step in the right direction. And it helps me do my job better for them to be positive about thinking about how they do the work today and how they want to do the work in the future, because that's a big stepping stone to get over, because a lot of organizations are just fix my problem now instead of going through a journey to figure out why it is the way it is, and how they can actually change their culture a little bit to make the change happen. So yeah, ideally I would love to be with the organizations that are farther on their journey so that we can use their information. But we've done everything from, we have some that are just starting out and maybe their culture doesn't 100% support lean process improvement organization-wide. But this new department that they're doing, they want to make sure that they go through the project of thinking about process before they design, and we'll help them along. We'll do their current state for them. We'll support them. We'll give them the information. We'll coach them through their journey, and do our best to create a space that's flexible to that journey, and can support where they're going. And then we work with really highly sophisticated organizations that are already doing their own operational modeling and have full detailed value stream maps before we even start, and that just takes it just to a different level. We can respond to that differently, but it's kind of full range in between. I think most hospital systems these days, I don't have a fake statistic or real statistic to throw out there. I think the last time I read an article, it was like in the 50 to 60% are at least saying the words at this point, but it's probably way higher than that. I think all of them, most hospital systems that we've worked with, recognize that there's opportunities to improve their patient care by looking at process.
Right. But yeah, we're probably in agreement that knowing the words is a good first step, and we're both in trying to help move people along in that journey, in that process. One question, this is more about just technology or the types of things people might ask you about. I love the process of doing the mock-ups, the full-scale mock-ups, the walkthroughs, the simulation of the work with cardboard. Do you have anyone push back and say anything like, well, that seems really outdated? Where's the virtual reality technology? And I'm curious, have you had that thrown at you, or have you or your firm given any thought to that? Like, what do you think might happen down the road, or do you think cardboard is still a pretty effective way, even if that maybe seems old school to people?
I think that we've certainly used that technology before, but there's something about physically touching things and physically being in a space and reacting with other humans. Because in the virtual reality world, it's the thing that's difficult. I can show you a perfect space and get you to feel like what it's in that space, but can I get you to feel like what it's like when you have a 3-year-old crash in that room, and you have to work with the other people in that room to make sure that you can save that child and make sure everything that you need in order to do that is within close proximity. And there's something about that, even if it's just cardboard, but having the actual equipment there and having 3-dimensional walls there that I can move, that always is more effective, or always has been more effective than either the computer animations or using the virtual equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's old school, but I don't need any training to teach anyone how to stand in that space and how to react to it.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it seems like when it comes time to make a change, the beauty of cardboard is that you just physically move it and you don't have to do any computer programming, or, it might be slower to do those iterations in a virtual reality environment.
Right. And a lot of times you have to have the design a little bit farther along because you have to actually create something for that environment to react to. Whereas the cardboard, we can do sketches and build it and have a pretty good representation within a day.
Yeah. So how would you summarize some of the results, or maybe there's certain case studies that you would point to, whether you can name names or not, about what the impact has been from going through this lean project delivery approach?
I think the best impacts are when organizations go through a big cultural change. And I can, Riley Hospital for Children, for instance, when they went from having multi-bay NICU rooms to having single bed NICU rooms for the NICU, that was a pretty big cultural change. There was a lot of fear there. There was a lot of apprehension from staff. They were worried that they weren't going to be able to see and kind of share responsibilities between staff members. And I think them having the opportunity to go through the process, understanding where they wanted to go, kind of see a future for that, actually us physically create that space and walk through it, made that project more successful. There were a lot of changes we did too. If you add the complexity of it being an integrated project where we had the people building the project on site, there's a lot of small changes we made to increase visibility, decrease costs so we could spend money elsewhere, that led to them having a better space. Akron Children's, we had a lot of the same instances. We had a design for the OR that was everyone loved in kind of sketch form, and when we built it out of cardboard, everybody hated it. Based on this well-loved progressive model that another large children's institution has got a lot of press over. So we did as close as we could to that, and when they got into the space, based on how they operate, how they wanted to operate, and kind of the culture of how they work, it was a disaster for them. Mm-hmm. So in a traditional process, if we would have actually built that based on how happy everyone was with those sketches, we would have been renovating it almost immediately. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of success stories, specifically I think when people are looking at drastically changing their model and giving them the opportunity to test that. Is that really going to work for you? Does that work for how your organization is, your community is, how you want to practice going forward? And then there's a lot of cost conversations that we could have about spending money in the right place, spending money on behalf of patient care, about taking care of your staff, and we're able to negotiate a lot of that better when we can have those conversations up front, and we can only do that in that kind of environment.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great information, it's kind of scanning back through the HKS website and some of the case studies. Mm-hmm. There's a good write-up here that you wrote about Akron Children's Hospital. I would encourage listeners, go to hksinc.com or do a Google search for HKS Lean project delivery, and there's a lot of good stuff on the website. And there's also a book that I've seen that was published by the Akron Children's Hospital people called, I don't know if it's L cubed or L3, but Lean Operations, Lean Design, Lean Construction, Building a Lean Hospital Facility. Are there one other question I was going to ask you to wrap up, what resources do you recommend? Because you mentioned going back and reading the Toyota Way when you were starting with this 8 or 9 years ago. There probably was not a book on quote unquote lean design or lean project delivery. Maybe there was something on lean construction, but what are some of the different resources you would recommend for people to go and learn more today?
So there are, I think a lot of the resources that we use just for general lean education are good for lean design and construction. LCI, the Lean Construction Institute, has actually published a couple of books. Most recently, a book called Transforming Design and Construction, which has a series of white papers. You can also get to those from their website. If you don't, you can actually buy the book from the website, or you can download some of those white papers. There are also this October publishing a book about target value design, and both of these books were written by a collaborative group of people that are actually practicing. So, and then they were edited by an executive editor or editors, depending on the book. But check those out. Those are pretty specific on how lean's being applied to design and construction. The Lean Construction Institute website is a good resource too for other publications and white papers and research studies. So that's a good resource as well.
Yeah, and it's totally self-serving on my part to mention, but Bernita, you are helpful with, and you're quoted in the third edition of my book Lean Hospitals, where it's admittedly small chapter compared to some of these other great books out there that focus more fully and deeply on lean design or lean construction. But I would recommend that to people. I think I'll make a PDF of that chapter available on the blog post for this episode, where you can see a few comments from Bernita, a little bit of the summary of the Akron Children's Hospital story and their results. So thank you, Bernita, for helping me out with that chapter and for the work that you're doing out there.
Thanks.
And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up the podcast for today. If people want to reach out, if they've got questions for you, what do you recommend in terms of some ways for people to be able to reach you?
They can email me at bbeikmann@hksinc.com. That's a good way to get a hold of me.
And again, as I'd mentioned, there's a lot of great information out there at hksinc.com, the website for HKS Architects. So, Bernita, it was really nice talking to you today. Thank you for sharing some of your perspectives and helping educate the listeners here about the use of lean and building better, more effective hospital buildings and clinic buildings. I was curious if you have a final thought to leave with the listeners.
Encourage the facilities that you work with to try to improve how they work and make what we do as design professionals actually support that work, so that we as a group can really make the patient experience better.
Well, it's an important goal, and thanks again for everything you're doing to help people reach those goals. Thanks again, Bernita.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For Lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.